So let me remind you where we stopped before lunch. So we were considering the problem of trajectory inference in the artificial full snapshot setting. I'm saying artificial because this is not the case that we have in practice, which we will deal right after. But this is the case where we observe at certain time the exact marginals of our stochastic process. And I presented these mean entropy estimators, introduced by Lavenant and co-authors, which consisted in minimizing this relative entropy with respect to the law of the Gaussian of the Brownian motion, under the constraint that we match the correct marginals. And we have a consistency result for this optimization for this estimator. And now the question is how to minimize, how to solve this problem to find this R star. And I've presented this lemma. So here I skipped the proof once again, but this one is obtained by a simple algebraic manipulation of the relative entropy, similar to the ones we have done previously. But it shows that minimizing the relative entropy with respect to W is the same as minimizing for each pair of marginals this quantity. Because if I have the constraint that RTI is equal to PTI for each TI, here this term does not intervene. Here this reference measure will be fixed. And so I just have to minimize the relative entropy with respect to this measure, which is an entropic optimal transport problem. So to sum up the method that we obtain in the full snapshot case, we do as follows. So for each pair of marginals, we solve this entropic optimal transport problem. So for each pair of time ti plus 1, we solve the entropic optimal transport problem between RTI and RTI plus 1. And RTI plus 1 with cost, well, see, the cost should be the logarithm, if you remember, this will be the minus tau times the logarithm of this, of the density of this Brownian kernel, so heat kernel. Here you notice that the time is not between 0 and 1, so we just have to modify the cost a little bit. This will be minus tau log of dw tau between ti and ti plus 1. So it's density with respect to Lebesgue, which, so here I'm going a bit fast because I will hide constant, but this is essentially x minus y squared divided by ti minus t. So ti plus 1 minus ti times 2 plus a constant. And here I'm using the approximation for small tau. OK. So here, the only difference with previously is that we divide by this time this delta t, because here we only let this Brownian motion evolve during this small time interval. So we solve this family of optimal transport problem between each pair. And this gives us gamma star a solution. I will call it gamma I plus 1 star the solution. And then you can find the optimal joint distribution by just gluing all these transport plans together. Glue these transport plans together with the formula which is at the bottom. So you define R star T1, etc. until T capital T dx1, etc., dxt, using the same formula as there. So here the first marginal will be pt1 of dx1. Then to move from pt1 to pt2, we use the first optimal transport plan, entropic optimal transport plan, which is gamma star gamma star from 1 to 2 dx2 condition on x1 and etc. Until gamma star from t minus 1 to t dxt conditioned on xt minus 1. So this is a formula which, when you have your solutions in the form of transport plan described by matrices, this is something you can compute numerically. So you really have the solution of like a computational solution to the original problem. So that's what we can do when we have the full snapshot setting. And here, in the end, we notice that the solution just consists in computing regularized optimal transport problems between all pairs of marginals. You can tell me, oh, maybe we don't need all this math to reach this solution. But let's see what the mathematics tells us, like what we learn from the mathematics. First is that it tells us that we need to use a particular cost, okay, which is not necessarily obvious, and the level of regularization tau, which is the same as our a priori. And the second thing that we learn from the mathematics is that we know precisely what doing this will give us, what prior we have in the solution, because we know that this is a technique that will lead us to recover such stochastic processes with diffusivity level tau. Okay, so that's for the full snapshot setting. And now for the last hour of this talk, of these lectures, I want to discuss the, how is it called? Let's say sparse snapshot setting. So this is the last section. I think we are in, no, maybe it's 3 to the sparse snapshot case or setting, which is really the one we care about in practice. And now we need to solve the problem globally. So we won't just have this independent entropic optimal transport problem. We'll need to look at the problem globally. So let me present to you the philosophy of the approach first. So in the case of the full snapshot, let's say here this potato is the space of probability distribution over X, and we had the exact observation of P at certain times. So here this is P T1, P T2, P T3, P T4, etc. And our method just consisted in joining these various marginals using these Schrödinger bridges. Okay, and here I should really go through the crosses, because we are really exactly matching these marginals. And this plot does not show everything, because we have seen that when we have a path in the space of probability measures, there are many ways, many stochastic processes that could generate this path. So here this picture does not capture this fact that we had chosen the specific way which actually corresponds to this equation, but at least we were doing this. We were interpolating between these various marginals. But now, if we have partial snapshots, we don't have access to this PT1, PT2, PT3, PT4. Instead, we have access to empirical versions. So mu hat of T1, mu hat of T2, and mu hat of T1, mu hat of T2, etc. These are empirical distributions of samples from the true marginals, and always with independent samples. Let's say here I can have mu hat of T3 and mu hat of T4, where So here, this is the sparse snapshot setting. And mu hat of Ti is 1 over Ni, the sum of delta x ij for I equals 1 to Ni, and x ij or IID samples from PTI. IID when j varies from 1 to Ni. So here we do not want to go through these empirical distributions exactly, because we know they are the wrong marginals. Instead, we would like to accumulate the knowledge over all our observations in order to produce a good interpolation. So we'll produce a curve in the space of probability measures. Maybe I can use a different color. Which hopefully, so I don't know if my plot is the best, but which goes through different measures, which I will call later in this talk mu1, mu2, mu3, mu4, which are measures which I do not know a priori. But what I will want from these measures is first to not be too far away from all my observations. So there will be here a data fitting term. And then I will have also an energy along my path to favor smooth enough interpolations. So that's the general philosophy behind the sparse snapshot setting. So now I will show you the formula. And the last part of this lecture will be on the beamer, because if we want to really go until the end of the story, I need to accelerate a little bit. So that's why I will switch to the beamer now. Okay. So here you have the answer that you have been thinking about in the past 10 minutes. This is just what I intuitively explained on the blackboard. Here is the estimator that has been proposed. So this is still this paper by Lavnanzan, Kim, and Schebinger. Instead of minimizing the problem that was on the blackboard in the full snapshot setting, we have still tau times the relative entropy between R and W tau. But now we have this data fitting term that will act on all the marginals and try to make them close in a certain way to the observations. And this data fitting term here will be in the next slide. It depends on two parameters, lambda. Lambda is the strength of the data of the regularization, and sigma will be another parameter. This is still some reminders about the notations. We have the W tau, this Wiener process, the relative entropy, and they have the following result, which is the mirror results of the one that we had for the full snapshot setting, that when the times of sampling become dense, but now the only assumption is that we have at least one sample per time. We don't need to have full samples, but only one full snapshots, but only one sample per each time. And if we only have one sample per each time, as long as the time of observations become dense in 0, 1, as t grows, so t the number of measurements, then we have consistency of this estimator. And of course, this will depend on which data fitting term we have chosen, and it will be in the next slide. So we first make t go to plus infinity, and then these two parameters, lambda and sigma, go to 0. So for instance, this is the consistency result that we have. I think there's a lot of interesting research direction to making these kind of statements more precise, more quantitative, but so far that's what we know about this estimator. Before I talk to you about how we can optimize this problem, let me describe what is this data fitting term. So it will be a sum of terms that are for each of the times from I equals to 1 to t of some data fitting term, which are the log likelihood of the observations. So assume that, so we have RTI as a distribution, and assume that what we observe are samples from RTI. The question is, what is the log likelihood of these observations? And this is this quantity here. So of course, we need to make a specific observation model. We assume that we observe noisy measurements under the data generating process RTI. So we have that the samples are generated by RTI plus some noise, and that's what we observe, the x hat. And if we assume that we observe this x hat, we can derive the log likelihood of this observation, which writes, so you know the log likelihood is the product of the likelihood of all the observations. When I take the log, this becomes a sum, and so I have a sum over all the observations, so an integral against this empirical measures mu hat ti. It does not really matter to see what is the exact expression of this data fitting term. There are two things that matter. The first thing that matters a lot for the consistency of the EC matter is that it's linear in the observations. That's what makes it possible to combine all the observations together to somehow average all the observations that we make at different time in order to have consistency in the limit. So that's something they use a lot in the proof, although I will not, again, the proof is a bit too advanced for these lectures. And then the second fact, which will be important for us, is that this function is convex in R, because R will be our optimization variables. We do not know the marginals in the sparse snapshot setting, and it is smooth. So just remember that it is as nice as what we want. We have a smooth and convex function, and so it will not pose problems. Because now the question that we want is to answer is how to minimize this problem. In the full snapshot setting, it was easy because the marginals were fixed. We just had to solve a series of independent Schrödinger bridge problems. Now we have also to optimize over the RTIs. So here I just recalled the definition of entropic optimal transport, but this is exactly as we have defined. And using the same lemma as I've shown here, we can reformulate this objective function, which was defined over P of omega, so the probability measures over path, which is called capital curl F of R. We can reformulate it as this function. And here I'm just using this exact same algebra. I replace the relative entropy between R and W tau by these two components, which are these Schrödinger bridges, or these entropic optimal transport terms, plus the entropies. And this is really just this lemma. What we know as a relationship between these two problems is that it is enough to solve this one to solve this, because once I have found a solution to this problem, I can, so here the variable are the mu i's. So the mu i's are the term marginals that I want to reconstruct, the ones that I was drawing on the blackboard. Once we have the mu i's, we know that we just need to compute the optimal transport plan between all pairs of successive time marginals. And then I glue all these transport plans together, and I define this probability measure R star, which, if I interpolate it using Gaussian Brownian bridges, will be the solution of our original problem. Okay? So we have this series of reductions, which is quite fun. Like every time we reduce and reduce the size of the problem, and in the end we have just a problem over a family of T probability measures. And that will be the problem that we want to solve. We have these unknown probability measures, which corresponds to the reconstructed full snapshot of the measure. So here you have this plot in red, which is, we have the time on the horizontal axis, the space on the vertical axis. And so the first time T1, we know in black, these are the reconstructed samples from the marginal of our stochastic process. So we have also to reconstruct the full snapshots. They are in black. In red is where the observations. And we have the connection, which defines this probability measure, which are represented with these shallow lines. Okay? And if I wanted to make this plot even more correct, I should not join them with straight lines, but with Brownian bridges. But okay, you can do this in your mind. Okay, so we have this problem. Let us see, so it's quite complicated. We have a data fitting term, and we have these optimal transport problems, we have this entropy, but there is a basic structure which is the one that I will discuss now. This is the sum of a convex, this is the sum of a function g of mu plus entropies. And now what I want to discuss for the rest of these lectures is a general technique to minimize functions of this form. So what I will consider is a setting where G is convex and H is the entropy. And we will just answer the general question, how can we solve such problems? We have the sum of a convex function over the space of probability measures plus an entropy. How can we solve such problems, in particular in high dimension? So we don't want to use, like if we were in small dimension, we could just grid the space. This is a convex problem and use the standard algorithms. But here, we're in dimension, let's say 20 or more. We cannot grid the space. We have to use particle-based methods. And that's what I will talk about now. And this family of algorithms are called mean-field-Langevin. And these are the ones that were generating the video I've shown, and I will show it again at the end of the lecture, but that I've shown yesterday. So I will introduce this class of methods. Now you can set aside the problem of trajectory inference. We have this general structure. The question is, how do we solve it? And I will show that we have a class of algorithms with exponential convergence in certain asymptotics. So before I introduce this algorithm, I wanted to give a few reminders about what they are a generalization of, which are Langevin or overdamped Langevin algorithms. What is the Langevin algorithm? It's a method to sample from a Gibbs distribution. So you choose a potential V. You define the Gibbs distribution with temperature tau exponential of minus V over tau plus times the normalization factor. And you want to sample from this distribution. So, for instance, in the simplest case, you have V is a quadratic function. So here this is X, here this is R. If V is a quadratic function, then exponential minus V over tau will be a Gaussian distribution. And you want to sample from a Gaussian distribution. So it's simple for the Gaussian, but for general potential, it's not immediate. But there is this algorithm called Langevin algorithms, or Langevin dynamics, which solve these problems approximately by using this noisy gradient descent dynamics. So you start from a random position in your space, x0, which you sample from some u0. And at each time, you follow minus the gradient times the step size, plus, and you add a little bit of noise. So let's say, oops, you start from a point that you sample at random on your space x. Here, minus the gradient of the potential drives you at this position. You add a little bit of noise, and then you follow the gradient at the new position, plus a bit of noise, etc. And you'll end up having a distribution which follows this Gibbs distribution. That's what we can prove, and I will show you the proof of this fact. So this dynamics, we'll study it in the continuous time limit, where we consider a small step size. And so in this continuous time limit, this is called the Langevin dynamics, and the noise becomes a Brownian process, Brownian motion. And we'll also work at the level of densities. So using some facts from Hilto calculus that I will skip, you can show that the law of x of t follows this drift diffusion equation. And here, I think we are all happy because I think this kind of equations is what is a link between all of us. Even sometimes we don't come from the same field. I think we all have seen this kind of drift diffusion equations. So this is the law of x of t, and it follows a drift given by the gradient of v plus diffusion with temperature level tau. Here you might wonder, is the tau the same as what we had before in the trajectory inference process? The answer will be yes, but do not think too much about it at the moment because the connection is a bit far away. And also, I just want to insist on the fact that now I'm just talking about a generic optimization problem. So the time t here is not the time of the process of the stochastic process. It's really a different concept. It's the optimization time. So we have these dynamics. And here are the kind of things that we can prove about it. So if we define this functional over the space of probability measures f tau of mu, which is the sum of a linear term of the measure, the integral of v d mu plus tau times the entropy. So here you can find that this is exactly the relative entropy of mu with respect to the Gibbs distribution. There is an interpretation as the Wasserstein gradient flow, but since Filippo did not talk to you about this kind of gradient flows, you can forget about it. You can think of this function just as a Lyapunov functional for our dynamics. In fact, we can see that this dynamics. It's a Lyapunov, so it will be decreasing along the dynamics. This function admits a unique minimizer, which is mu star, because this is a relative entropy, we know that. And if mu star satisfies the so-called rho-log-Sobolev inequality, which is a certain inequality which I will introduce after, then we have exponential convergence. Here, this is written at the level of the objective function, but this is also in terms of the certain, for instance, in terms of the Wasserstein metric, you have exponential convergence towards the Gibbs distribution with a rate which depends on this factor here, which appears in this log-Sobolev inequality, which I will introduce later. And here, what we are happy with is that we have minimized the function, which is the sum of a linear term plus an entropy. What we have as a problem is to minimize the sum of a convex function plus an entropy. And it turns out that these kind of tools, they can be generalized to this wider context where we have, instead of a linear term here, we have a convex function. And if we manage to solve this problem using these kind of tools, then we can come back to our trajectory inference, and we have an optimization that can solve it. That's what I want to present now. Let us generalize this problem, where now we take a convex function over the space of probability measures, and we want to minimize G plus tau times H. Okay? So there will be some assumption on G to make the dynamics well behaved. First, it's differential. So here I called it the first variation. It depends on the subfield. We call it different ways. But this is the differential of the functional G in the space of probability measures. I will call it V of mu. So V for variation. You can think of it this way. And we need to assume certain things. So we need to assume that this function admits a minimizer. This usually can be easily dealt with. And we will need also some stability of this first variation of G. So G should be a nice function over the space of probability measures. In particular, when I perturb a little bit the probability, I should not change too much the value because it needs to be differentiable. And moreover, I need the differential V to be Lipschitz continuous in a certain strong sense. So when I move mu and mu prime, so what I did not explain is V will be a continuous function over X, which depends on the measure mu. So it depends on two things, the measure and the point. And when I make the measure and the point vary, I should have a Lipschitz behavior. So here, this is the distance on X, and here this is the Wasserstein distance in the space of measures. So I need this kind of strong regularity. But all the assumptions which I will make now, they will be satisfied for our problem of trajectory inference. But here I'm presenting the general framework. And when we have this result, we can define, when we have this stability, okay, we can define a certain algorithm which, here I called it particle gradient flow, sometimes it's called swarm optimization dynamics, there are various names, but these are techniques that use a swarm of particles to optimize a function. And here is the particular dynamics that we consider. We have m particles. So m will be the number of a certain number of particles, and I is the index of each particle. And each particle will follow this sort of Langevin dynamics, except that the potential that we follow the gradient of itself depends on time. It depends on the empirical distribution mu hat of t of all the particles. So we have all these particles, which in the case of the Langevin dynamics, if you have one particle or if you put a second particle, they will evolve independently. But now, because they all intervene in the definition of the gradient, we have these interactions between all the particles. This is what we will implement in practice. So in practice, we use this kind of dynamics that we discretize in time. And for the theory, we consider the mean field limits. So we consider an infinite number of particles. And here there is a large literature which studies this kind of limits. When m goes to plus infinity, we can see that a typical particle from this swarm follows the following stochastic differential equation, which is exactly as a Langevin dynamics, except that we have the potential V, which depends on the measure mu, and through the law of the stochastic process. So here this is nonlinear because we have this dependency on the law itself in the equation. So these are dynamics which often appear when we consider swarm methods for optimization. But here, what I want to show to you is that this particular structure of having a convex term plus an entropy allows to have global convergence of this kind of dynamics. So what we'll consider is the evolution of the law. So this is, if you look at the law of x of t, it follows this drift diffusion equation. So the drift is given by the gradient of v of mu t, and we have a diffusion with temperature too. So here the only difference with the Langevin dynamics is that we have this nonlinear drift here, drift term. So the question now is, does this converge to the global minimizer of G plus H? And for that, let me now define this log-Sobolev inequality, which was used in the proof of convergence of the standard Langevin dynamics, overdamped Langevin dynamics. So the various objects that intervene in this log-Sobolev inequality are the relative entropy. This is an object we have seen several times already. And the relative Fisher information, so I of mu nu, which is this quantity, so the integral of the gradient of the log of the relative density between mu and nu squared against dmu. So this is another measure of discrepancy between mu of nu and nu, but you see that that involves also the gradient. This quantity, you cannot really invent it. When you see it the first time, you might think, where does it come from? And it will be very natural when you look at the proof. When you differentiate the Lyapunov function, this is exactly the quantity that comes up. And so that's why we need to have control on this quantity. So the assumption that we make is that there is a log-Sobolev inequality. So for all measure mu in our space of probability measures, we define the Gibbs distribution associated to mu, but here V is now the first variation of the objective function G. So for all measure mu, when I take the first variation, I obtain a function of like this one, V, and I define the Gibbs distribution. And for all these distributions, I want to satisfy this inequality, that we have a control, a lower bound on this relative entropy with respect to the given by the, we have an upper bound of the relative entropy given by the Fisher information. Here, this is a bit abstract, but you will see that this is just what we need to conclude the proof. And in fact, this kind of, why we are happy is that we need this to conclude the proof, and it turns out that this kind of inequalities have been studied a lot in probability or in concentration theory, and we have many criterion that allows to guarantee that this kind of inequality hold a priori. So here I'm giving very two simple examples, but this is a large literature on this. There is a large literature on these log-Sobolev inequalities. But for instance, if your space is compact, which is the thing that I've assumed throughout, I just need to have uniform upper bounds on the differential of my function g, so v, so that this kind of inequality holds. So if you have never made this inequality so far, they're a bit technical, abstract. It's a large field, but there are some simple a priori assumptions which allow to guarantee that what we need is satisfied. And in particular, in our compact case, we will just need to have uniform boundedness of this first differential. If we are in a non-compact space, we also need to have some tails that vanish fast enough. So we'll assume this kind of inequalities. And since once we have these inequalities, we can prove that the mean field Langevin dynamics, it converges at an exponential rate to the global minimizer. So this is exactly the same statement that we had for the Langevin dynamics, but now it deals with a more general class of dynamics, which are also nonlinear. And we obtain, as a particular case, the convergence of the Langevin dynamics. Because when g of mu is the integral of v d mu, this is a linear function, it's convex, and we recover the convergence of the Langevin dynamics. So let me give a few words on the proof of this fact by starting from the proof of the convergence of the Langevin dynamics. So in the case of the Langevin dynamics, we have this fixed potential V, and we have its corresponding Gibbs distribution. Here I fixed tau, the temperature equals to 1 for simplicity. And we have this objective function, which is the sum of this linear term plus the entropy, which can be rewritten as a relative entropy. Now, if you do direct computations, you differentiate in time your Lyapunov function, which is something, the first idea you can come up with when you want to study the convergence of an algorithm. You observe that you obtain minus the Fisher information between ut and nu being this Gibbs distribution. So that's why this object is interesting. It's because this is exactly what we obtain when we differentiate in time this function. Now we use the Log-Sobolev inequality, which tells us precisely that there is this sort of inequality. And here, this term is exactly our suboptimality gap. So we have that the suboptimality gap, when it's differential in time, is smaller than minus 2 rho, where rho is a positive constant, times the suboptimality gap, and you can conclude with Grunwald's lemma that you have exponential convergence. This is a very standard proof technique in optimization, and it turns out that what was key here was the existence of this Log-Sobolev inequality. Now, for the general case, where we have instead a convex function, we again have a simple proof strategy. Of course, here there are many details that I'm skipping, how to prove such inequalities, how to differentiate in times, but this is, I would say these are, I mean, at least this differentiation, this is really a technical detail. Now, in the general case, we do not have a fixed Gibbs distribution. We have a family of Gibbs distribution which are associated to all the measures that I encountered throughout my dynamics. So this exponential of minus v of mu t. So I recall that v, this is the differential of my objective function g evaluated at mu t. So I have these probability measures. And the two facts that allow to move this, to generalize this proof to this more general case is that when we differentiate in time the objective function, you obtain the Fisher information between ut and ut. So this is what justifies looking at this particular definition of ut. Here, this is an object which is interesting only because it comes up when we differentiate in time f. So we have the first part of the proof. Next, we use this Log-Sobolev inequality that we can guarantee in many settings. But now here we do not immediately recover our suboptimality gap, but using the convexity of the function g. So here this is a simple convexity inequality. I'm skipping the details, but just by using the convexity of g, we can prove that the suboptimality is sandwiched between these two relative entropies. So here this is the relative entropy between mu t and the global optimum, and this relative entropy here. So here we are using this inequality, and we can conclude the chain of inequalities. And now using Grunwald's lemma, we have exponential convergence to the global minimum. So that's the simple outcome that I would say for this kind of computations is that if you already knew about the Langevin dynamics, that it can minimize, that it can sample from some dynamics, now you can see that they can be generalized to solve much more general problems, which are the sum of a convex function plus an entropy. Okay. So here I'm listing a few references that have studied this mean field Langevin dynamics. But what I would like to mention is that this structure of problems, when you have G plus H, they can modelize many, like they can be encountered in very different settings, and in particular, the first time where I encountered such structure of problems is when studying the behavior of gradient descent on neural networks. So here I will not explain why when you look at neural networks there is a link with this mean field Langevin dynamics, but this was one of the first techniques to prove the convergence of neural networks in certain settings. And here so we will see the application of these ideas to a trajectory inference. So let us go back to our problem. Now that we have this optimization tool at our disposition, here this is a slide that you have already seen. I'm just recalling the few objects. We have our original objective function that we have shown could be reduced as a function of this form. We have the sum of G plus H. And we know that it's sufficient to solve this second problem, to solve the original one. Now there is a small subtlety that I'd like to mention, is that G here is not convex. So we cannot immediately apply our technique to this decomposition G plus H, but in fact, G plus H, so the total function Gf, is a convex function. And these remarks, these are still here. Here I told you this morning that this function was not, this function, when I add the entropy, so the entropic optimal transport plus a little bit of entropy, this is a convex function. So here, because I add these entropies, and this is natural from the problem, this function f is convex. So if I want to implement the mean field Langevin dynamics, I can, of course, always do it, even if G is not convex. If I want to have the guarantees of global convergence, I need to introduce a little bit more of entropy, so to additionally regularize a little bit more, so that G plus tau h is convex, and then I add epsilon h, which is the additional entropy, which makes the convergence proof work. Okay, but in practice, I did not notice any problem with G plus tau h, so I do not know if this is really needed to add this epsilon, but times the entropy, but at least for the theory to work through, we need to regularize a little bit the problem. And in that case, well, everything I've mentioned works because we are in the right context. You just need to check that the assumptions are satisfied. This is a bit technical, but this works. So when the space is compact, and that's the compactness is needed to have the regularity of the differential. But in this compact case, we have well-posed dynamics and exponential convergence to the global minimizer, and this is in the mean field limit. Mean field limit means that for each of the this means that the number of particles that I use to discretize my problem goes to plus infinity. So in our problem of trajectory inference, we need to discretize each of these measures mu I, which are the reconstructed time marginals at the times ti's. And so I discretize them, and the guarantee holds in the infinite limits when I have an infinite number of particles. And here, this is just the same animation that I've shown previously. This is this Langevin dynamics that we apply to the problem of trajectory inference with the objective function that was on this slide here. Okay? So at each iteration, I need to solve an entropic optimal transport problem. I need to compute the potentials, like the dual variables. These dual variables, as I've explained to you this morning, they are the first differential of this cost. And so this gives me the differential. I can take the gradient, and etc. So that's what's done in these iterations. But this is what we obtain. And at convergence, we are sampling from the distribution that we want to sample from, this low on pass. Okay. So I will conclude this set of lectures with some results on true data. To show you whether this all kind of these techniques give us something reasonable. So here, this is just a plot that shows that indeed the objective function that we wanted to minimize when we look at its evolution through the iterations, it decreases. And now here, this is a true data set that was taken from the genomic data, single cell RNA sequencing data that I've mentioned in the beginning of these lectures. So this is the full data set, but we have subsampled it. So here the color represents the day of sampling, and this is a small dimensional projection. This is a two-dimensional projection of the data set, which is here 20-dimensional. This is the day of sampling in the color, and we want to, from the subsamples that we have taken from the full data set, we want, using our technique, to interpolate and to recover the full data set as well as possible. This is just a synthetic way to try to see whether we obtain good results. And this is the accuracy that we get. So the smaller, the better. And here, this is for each day. So here we measure the difference between the reconstructed time marginal versus the ones that we have in the full data set. And the smaller, the better. This is a notion of distance on the space of probability measure that we use here. So in green, this is the distance between the subsamples and the full data set. We see they are quite large. In red, this is what we obtain with the convex method. So if we were fixing the position of the particles and only, so it's like fixing a grid in our 20-dimensional space and then solving our convex optimization problem on a grid. Since we are in a high dimension, this is a very inefficient technique, so we have a large error. And with this mean field Langevin dynamics, we reduce the error of this problem. So this is just one quantitative evaluation of the method. And so I think the next talk is at 3 p.m., so I will stop here so that we have a little bit of pause. And I thank you for your attention through these 3 hours.
Thank you very much. Any questions? And I was wondering, so you applied this to this particular application. I was wondering whether there might be other kinds of application where you deal actually with actual movement of things like cells, or have you been, for example, if you have a snapshot of crowds, you know, and you register information of people, and you do not have the tracking information on the tracker, you do not have like random information, but only the layer information. That might be.
Yes, so I think that here I talked about this biological application of cells, but this is just one motivation. I think this problem of trying to recover trajectories from these independent measurements, they can come up in other applications, but that's something I would expect. I think when it deals with real people, we don't have destructive measurements, but we have anonymous measurements, sometimes for privacy reasons. And this is the same problem that arises in that case, if you have only anonymous measurements, because you need some optimal transport to reassign the labels.
And also missing data.
And missing data. So here, this is a way to fill in the missing data. So
that would be even simpler to explain that in another, when you deal with real. It's very interesting.
Ah, okay.
There might be even
instead of starting from this gen data. Ah, okay. That's probably true, but I should also stress on the fact that this single-cell RNA sequencing data, so this technique that gets this gene data, it's something which is apparently very important in biology at the moment. So a lot of biologists are interested by this problem, and they understand why we present it. But yeah, maybe in a broader audience, there might be easier applications. Yeah. I think there was a raised hand, which, okay. So I think we are done. Okay. Yeah.
With this last application, you are simulating cells with the R that you reconstructed with the current method, and then comparing the simulated cells to the original data set?
No, here the full data set is an actual measurements.
Yes, but using the subsample.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then to add the cells for the MFL, for the MFL part, no, it's not the MFL part. You have simulated something under the law. At what moment do you use the law that you reconstructed from the data?
So here, what this experiment tries to assess is whether the model of drift diffusion is relevant for biological applications. Because we know that our method, at least it's in the asymptotic when we have mini particles, but let's say we are already in this asymptotic, we know it will interpolate between the points using this prior that we have a drift diffusion process at the level of the cells. But no one knows, I mean, biologists are not all on the same page on this question. So here, this seems to suggest at least that it's not so much of a bad idea because it decreases the idea compared to just the subsamples. This is one evaluation. Of course, when we are dealing with real data, it's hard to know what is the real truth behind. But that's what we assess. So did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
And just a second question is that you mentioned before the parameter sigma for the method G1.
Yeah.
Do you have such parameter to fix in the minimum?
No, so we have 3 hyperparameters, tau, which is the one you have seen throughout. Okay, so this one. But then there's lambda and sigma. Lambda is the strength of the regularization. Sigma is a bit harder to interpret. And these ones, we did cross-validation in practice. But yeah, we are not happy to have this many parameters. Yes, yeah, for the comparison, we use the same one. Yeah.
are you able to give like an estimation of the potential?
That's a good question. So for this, with this method, it has not really been studied what is this potential. In fact, there's a link, like we know what is the answer, but it's not written anywhere. This is is given by the dual variables of the Schrödinger problem. Like you're solving a series of Schrödinger problems, and at each time you have these dual variables. These are in fact the potentials that you want to recover. I'm saying this as a claim because it's not proved anywhere. And I think more generally, these kind of techniques, they can be coupled with methods where we parameterize our potential inside the parametric class of function, let's say a neural network, because this is the trend now. And you can use this as an energy, like this relative entropy, as a general energy to train your neural network. I think this could be an interesting direction to combine this idea and directly estimate this potential psi. Because biologists, they also like to see this psi. So, yeah. But this is not done yet. Yeah.
Perhaps the last very short question.
In this model, there is assumption that you are evolving independently, but when you introduce cell burst and death, you introduce correlations. And does the system deals well with these correlations?
When I introduce what? Do correlation?
Correlations, when you introduce birth and death of cells. If you do like binary branching or something like that, you introduce correlations, and does the system, does the method deals with these correlations to reconstruct the law?
So that's a good question. The theory for the birth and branching case is so far very new. So there's Hugo Lavenant and Émeric Barada who have started to study this question, but so far really at a more abstract level, like we don't have answers to your questions yet, so I cannot say anything.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.